Censorship and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton Tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Where we're focused on the UK's cost of living crisis, helping you to beat the squeeze. I'm Liam Halligan, and for the next hour, we'll be talking about sky-high petrol and diesel prices. They're soaring, not least if you use motorway service stations, which are charging lots more than the rest. Plus, something for the weekend or not. We'll be sampling a non-alcoholic gin and tonic with a former Made in Chelsea reality TV star who's now trying to launch a clean drinking revolution. All that and more on The Money after the GB News headlines with Rhiannon Jones.
Good afternoon. It's just gone 1 o'clock. I'm Rhiannon Jones in the GB newsroom. A major incident has been declared in Suffolk as Storm Eunice hit southern England, causing widespread disruption. Flights have been cancelled, roads closed and rail services suspended. People are being advised to stay at home after the Met Office issued red weather warnings with winds reaching up to 90 miles per hour. Hundreds of schools have also been closed. An emergency COBRA meeting will be held later to discuss the government's response to this latest storm. The Met Office is urging people to take the threat seriously.
The main message has to be just take heed of these warnings. This is serious. We only issue red weather warnings when we think there is a threat to life. So please take these warnings seriously. Please stay inside, particularly across those red warning areas. But again, in the amber warning area, please only do it. Just think about whether you need to make that journey.
Meanwhile, at Heathrow Airport, there have been some difficult landings as pilots negotiate the stormy conditions. Planes can be seen bouncing on the runways with gusts of wind testing the skills of those handling them. Some pilots were even forced to abandon their descent because of the extreme weather. Russia plans to stage massive drills involving ballistic and cruise missiles, with President Vladimir Putin overseeing the nuclear exercise tomorrow. The war games come amid heightened tensions with Ukraine, both sides accusing each other of ceasefire violations. In Poland, the US Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin said there's no evidence to suggest Moscow is moving its forces away from the border. He also reaffirmed America's commitment to NATO.
Ironic that what Mr. Putin did not want to see happen was a stronger NATO on his flank. And that's exactly what he will see going forward.
Hundreds of people have been rescued after a ferry caught fire between Greece and Italy in the early hours of the morning. The Greek Coast Guard had confirmed most of the 290 people on board the Italian-flagged ship were taken to the island of Corfu. There are no immediate reports of deaths, but there are concerns for 2 people still trapped on the ferry. The cause of the fire is not yet known. Wales has scrapped the use of COVID passes. A person's vaccination status was required for entry to indoor and outdoor venues, including sports grounds and nightclubs. Although the rules have been changed, venues have been told they can still demand proof of jabs if they want to. NHS leaders in England are warning free COVID tests and self-isolation must remain in place for the public. A survey of senior staff found 79% disagree with plans to scrap free PCR and lateral flow tests. More than 3/4 also want to keep the legal requirement to self-isolate following a positive result. The Prime Minister is expected to announce a Living with COVID plan on Monday. Former Medical Director Andrew Vallance-Owen says testing is vital.
The evidence is still there. There are a lot of hospital admissions still. For people who find that they are positive, they should stay in quarantine for a few days, especially if they're going to be going into places where there are lots of people, particularly where there are lots of vulnerable people. I think it's premature to cut it all off now. One step at a time is what I would advise, and stick to the science.
The International Olympic Committee has launched a scathing attack on the team behind the 15-year-old figure skater at the centre of a drugs probe. IOC President Thomas Bach says he's disturbed by the chilling attitude of Kamila Valieva's coaches. The Russian teenager fell twice in the women's free skate final at the Beijing Winter Olympics and slumped from first place to fourth. There was no hug for Valieva as she left the ice in tears. Instead, she was asked by her coach why she'd stopped fighting. Former director of anti-doping at UK Sport, Michelle Verroken, told GBNews more should be done to protect young athletes.
We now have a category called protected persons as of 1st of January last year. And yet I wonder if the procedures themselves have actually accommodated the fact that these are children taking part in sport, and we are subjecting them to the same rules, the same procedures as we do adult athletes. So yes, the expectation has been extremely high on a very young person.
Michelle Broken there. This is GB News. We'll bring you more as it happens, including the latest on Storm Eunice. Now let's return to Liam and On the Money.
It's 6 minutes past 1. Coming up on The Money today, we're starting with some good news. The bounce back in UK car making as the economy gradually escapes the pandemic aftershocks. But why is it when oil prices rise on global markets, the cost of filling up on the forecourt goes up even more? But when oil gets cheaper, petrol and diesel prices barely fall. We'll be discussing motorists' spiralling fuel costs. As ever, a grown-up discussion with people who really know their stuff. Plus, I'll be speaking to regional reporters as Storm Eunice wreaks havoc across the UK, bringing winds of 100 miles an hour. And today's In-Depth Money Talks interview.
I created Cleanco out of a desire to fill a gap in my life. You know, when I went sober, and that was just before the birth of our first child, I just wanted to assess, you know, my relationship with alcohol, which over the years has been a bit tempestuous, a bit turbulent.
Today's Money Talks guest is reality TV star Today's Money Talks guest is reality TV star turned entrepreneur Spencer Matthews. We discuss alcohol-free spirits. Yep, you heard that right. Gin, rum and tequila without the alcohol. And guess what? The market's booming. The former Made in Chelsea personality shares his very personal reasons for starting his Cleanco drinks business. Now On the Money's all about tackling the rising cost of living crisis, helping you beat the squeeze. So I want to hear your experiences, ideas, concerns. Email me at a new email address, beatthesqueeze@gbnews.uk, or tweet @GBNews. And while you're at it, don't forget to subscribe to the GB News YouTube channel. I want to know about your efforts to make ends meet, making GB News viewers and listeners a central part of this show. So stay with us. This is GB News. I'm On the Money. I'm Liam Halligan, and you're On the Money. Now it's Friday, so despite the storms, let's start with some good news. Global car production, of course, has been hammered by this pandemic, given supply chain disruption and shortages of semiconductors and other components. But while Eurozone car makers remain in the doldrums, the UK is now showing signs of a bounce back. In January, UK car registrations rose 27.5% year on year, with around 25,000 new vehicles on the road. This partly reflects last year's low point, but for manufacturers, car dealers and the broader economy, it's good news. Well, we'll need some good news if you've filled up your car or van with petrol or diesel lately. Prices on the forecourt are soaring. Over recent days, North Sea oil hit $100 a barrel for the first time since 2014. That's pushed average unleaded petrol prices to almost £1.47 a litre, a new record. Diesel's even more expensive at £1.52. Now, filling up a standard saloon costs more than £80 at these prices. But these prices I've just mentioned are the national average. Some petrol stations are charging much more. Cynical retailers have been cashing in on half-term getaway traffic, charging £1.60 plus for a litre of unleaded. At that rate, filling up a regular car costs over 90 quid. Now, On the Money is about helping you beat the cost of living squeeze, so what can you do? Well, avoid motorway petrol stations for one thing. While the national average for unleaded is £1.47 a litre, motorway forecourts are charging an average of almost £1.66. So fill up locally or at supermarkets. And maybe think about car sharing too. Now, there's something else that really gets my goat. From October to December, oil prices on global markets actually dropped by 20%. Did you see petrol and diesel prices on the forecourt fall to any significant extent? No, me neither. One reason for that is the lack of competition between fuel retailers. Another reason is that more than half of what you pay for your petrol and diesel goes to the government in fuel duty and VAT. And so as petrol prices keep rising, that's today's On the Money question. Rising petrol and diesel costs. How high can they go? Well, we're joined here on The Money by car dealer extraordinaire, friend of the show, Danny Kelly. And in the studio, it's Vicky Price, Chief Economic Advisor at the Centre for Economic and Business Research, another On The Money regular. Danny, let's go to you first. You're a keen motorist, to say the least. Why do you think it is that motorway service stations are charging £1.60 up to £1.65 even more, when the average price for the litre of unleaded is more like £1.47?
Do you know what? It's one of the basic tenets of capitalism, Liam, supply and demand. And if you're foolish enough to not, as you quite correctly said in your monologue, not to fill up locally before you set off on the motorway, if you're foolish to have to rely on paying 20 pence a litre more than you would do at a car supermarket, at a supermarket petrol station, I have very little sympathy. Like you, Liam, I try and save my customers as much money as possible. I try and look after their interests as much as your show does. And my advice would be not to be so foolish, to be almost trapped into paying ridiculously inflated prices. It's not just the fuel that's 20 pence a litre overpriced, Liam. It's everything. If you want a sandwich, if you want a cup of coffee, if you have to have anything at a petrol station on a motorway, you are going to have your pants pulled down and your backside slapped by these people. And there's a bit of me that says, well, if you're foolish enough not to fill up, or if you're foolish enough not to get your snacks before you go on a long journey, then so be it. You deserve what you get. But I think there's very little we could do about it. It's supply and demand, and it's a captive audience.
Danny, one reason we wanted you on the show today was also because of those new car registration figures out. There's been a bit of an uptick in the UK in January compared to January 2021. Obviously, car manufacturing in the UK slumped, new registrations slumped in 2020 and into 2021 because of the pandemic. Are you noticing this uptick in your car dealing business?
Yeah, I specialise in used cars, Liam, but I'm reliant on buying part exchanges from new car dealerships like Audi, BMW, etc. So the fewer cars that are going through the system because of this microchip shortage, we are seeing more and more cars coming through now. The average waiting list is really weird. Just for a bit of historical context on this, in 2020, at the start of the pandemic, when the whole world went into lockdown, car manufacturers themselves closed their factories and they stopped buying these microchips, and everything needs a microchip. A humble Ford Focus, modern technology in new cars is amazing. It has around about 1,700 of these semiconductors or microchips. So what happened was, when people stopped ordering new Fords and new BMWs because they were staying indoors and the dealerships were closed by COVID legislation, what happened was that these microchips were then diverted to technological areas elsewhere, like smartphones, like televisions, things that people are still going to need and they can order online. So the car manufacturers are playing catch up, really, Liam, and they're taking orders, and people are having to wait 6 to 12 months for their new cars. What that means to the used car market, Liam, is that it's reached a peak. I've noticed that car customers are now voting with their feet, and news has got out that the humble Ford Focus, let's just stick with the Ford Focus, the humble Ford Focus is more expensive than it was a used car, say, 2 years ago. And people are just thinking to themselves, what on earth am I doing spending £1,500, £2,000 more than I could have picked up the very same car 18 months, 2 years ago. So people know. I've noticed now that now word's got out, people are voting with their feet, and they're either keeping the old cars and they're maybe getting them maintained and re-MOT'd because they're not prepared to pay overinflated prices. Because at some point, I think in May or June, I think there's going to be the bottleneck will be relieved, and there'll be a lot more new cars on the market, a lot more used cars going through the system, and of course, go back to my earlier capitalism tenet, supply and demand. There'll be more cars than is needed, and that will bring down the prices. So I'm noticing that prices are cooling. Prices are definitely cooling on the more expensive cars, 15,000 to 35, 40,000 pounds. People really are now. They are waiting because if you need
interesting stuff, Danny. I just want to bring in Vicky Price. I've noticed too in the government inflation numbers, the price of used cars is a major component of that inflation for the shortage of new car reasons that you suggest. Let's just go back to the main issue that we're discussing, Vicky, these high petrol and diesel prices, particularly at motorway service stations, 165, 166 compared to a national average of 145, 146. I said it's partly due to a lack of competition. Now, the retailers do compete, but if you're going along a motorway and you need to fill up, you need to fill up.
No, that's absolutely true. And of course, it has been going on for a very long period of time. So the difference has been huge throughout, my driving history, if you like. So yes, you try and avoid them, but of course they have to pay quite a lot to get those concessions to be there. So it does cost. So supply and demand in a way, but it's also supply and demand in terms of the availability of that space, the actual forecourt being there. And it's true that quite a lot of other prices are quite high for anyone who stops. But in reality, all those companies that we know, whether it's Pret a Manger or anything else, have all set up outlets in those places. And in fact, you don't find them being particularly more expensive. So people still go there quite a lot and enjoy at least having a break as you're driving. But a lot of them then avoid going and filling up. They just drive straight out. And that's very sensible.
Now, I mentioned in the opening that the share of the money you spend on your petrol and diesel when you fill up the car, 55% of that goes to the government at the moment. Sometimes it's higher. We haven't had the so-called fuel escalator where the duty on petrol goes up automatically, but a lot of the duty and VAT are still a big part of that. You've worked at the most senior level in Whitehall as an economist. Do you think there's any chance, given these spiralling energy costs, heating at home, fuel bills in general, filling up your car or your van, do you think there's any chance the government may give some relief and while not escalating the duty on fuel, actually cut the duty on fuel?
OK, well, you're quite right. They haven't escalated the fuel duty, get that right, for 12 years.
Yeah.
And they could have been collecting an awful lot more money.
But it's still more than half of what we pay goes to the government. That's high by international standards.
Yes, but the government does need that type of revenue, and it's been relying quite considerably, as we know, on people also paying a tax to drive their car at all, which has been linked to how polluting the car is. Now they're going to lose all that. And of course, what we didn't discuss is that a very large percentage of those new car registrations and the new car production is electric vehicles, which of course means they don't have to pay this high price for petrol. And of course, they don't pay very much to the government anyway in terms of tax duty, which they pay when you just get a car and drive it by the year. So that's going to be a serious problem for the government. I think the ability of them reducing the tax they have on fuel right now is very, very limited given the needs they're going to have in the future.
Well, this is On the Money with Liam Halligan. Danny Kelly, after the break, I'm going to be asking you what you think of the fact that over half of what you pay for your petrol and diesel goes to the government. We'll keep this discussion going with Danny, with Vicky Price. We're bringing in a GB News viewer for his take on the energy crisis. We want more and more of our viewers here on The Money to talk to us about this cost of living squeeze. Stay with us. You're On the Money.
Hello, I'm Aidan McGivern. Storm Eunice is battering the UK with red warnings in force for dangerous winds in some parts of the country. Eunice has deepened rapidly overnight, and it's on the southern flank of this storm where the strongest winds are expected, and those strong winds with disruption likely in many places sweeping east across the southern half of the UK during the rest of Friday. Scotland, Northern England and Northern Ireland likely to see impacts from wind and from snow, mainly over hills. For the southern half of the country, amber warning for widespread disruption and dangerous winds, but the most dangerous winds in the red areas towards the southwest as well as the southeast, where the focus will increasingly turn during the afternoon as the strongest of the winds push east across the country. 70 to 80 mile per hour wind gusts for southeast England. Even inland, that would make it the most powerful storm for some years, and widespread disruption along with some danger from those winds. But further north, the wind's not quite as strong. However, we are going to see further outbreaks of rain and hill snow, particularly for Scotland, where there'll be blizzards over hills and drifting of any lying snow. 3 or 4 Celsius across Scotland, Northern Ireland, Northern England, 8 or 9 Celsius in the south. But it stays very windy despite the sunshine during the rest of the day. It stays very windy well into the evening, and then the winds gradually come down overnight with clear spells in the south, 1 or 2 showers in the west and the north, but further hill snow to come for Scotland and northern England. 0 to 2 Celsius in the north, 3 Celsius for Cardiff, London, Southampton as we start off Saturday. Some sunshine, mainly in the east first thing before the next system barrels in from the west. This will affect primarily the southern half of the UK with outbreaks of rain and hill snow for North Wales and northern England, as well as the North Midlands, and accompanied by strong winds, gales around the south coast, but not as strong as today. Quieter further north with some sunshine and showers. Sunday sees wet and windy weather return from the northwest.
GB News is the UK's home of discussion and debate
from all perspectives.
To stay up to date on the latest stories,
make sure that you subscribe to the GB News channel
right here on YouTube.
You can watch us live 24/7 across the whole world.
You can also check out exclusive content and catch up on previous episodes of your favourite shows.
Every day, we ask the questions
that you'd ask, so why not add your voice to the conversation in the comments section?
Don't forget to subscribe. We are GB News, Britain's news channel.
Every night at 11 on GB News, we bring you the next day's stories the day before.
Basically like time travel.
If it's a big story, we'll cover it, guaranteed. But we'll also have some fun along the way.
Big opinions, big laughs. Sometimes big hair.
This is
Headliners, the paper review show that won't send you to sleep like the others will.
11 p.m, 7 nights a week. Join us.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon
and Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton Tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Welcome back. You're on the money with me, Liam Halligan, on GB News Television and DAB Plus Digital Radio. It's 1:23. Now, we're discussing petrol and diesel prices, which have been soaring across the UK, not least at motorway service stations. But let's now broaden the discussion out to include energy costs in general. It's a huge story, this cost of living squeeze. I'm still with my expert panel, but I'm delighted to be joined also by a GB News viewer, Alex Watt, who lives in Cheshire. Alex, great to have you with us. Thanks for watching On the Money. You've got some thoughts on the energy crisis in general, the way the UK should be responding and making ourselves less vulnerable in the future.
Yeah, that's right, Liam. I think one thing that we've tended to not consider is our own energy security. We've gone for many years now. We've allowed our nuclear generators to run out. We've not replaced our nuclear generating capacity. We've spent an awful lot of money on wind and solar generating capacity, but at the end of the day, they don't create what's known as base load within the industry. The sun doesn't always shine, the wind doesn't always blow. And we need base load, and we have, as I understand it, been drawing some base load from nuclear capacity that's in France that comes via cable across the channel. But in essence, this whole cost of living crisis, which is really being driven by our inability to bring in natural gas and fuels from abroad, is partly because we've lost control of our own generating system. And we're not generating enough of our own electricity. And as we can see now, you know, there are actions around the world. We've got the problem in Ukraine at the moment, which will always put pressure on us as a country if we're buying our energy from abroad. So I think we've missed a big opportunity. And I think we really need to look at energy in the sense that it is, I think in economist terms, you can correct me if you're wrong because you're the economist, but it really is now a public good. We have no life without electricity. We're moving towards electric cars. Everything in our homes is going to be electric, including our boilers. We've got massive infrastructure that we need to bring into the UK to be able to do that in the first place. And then on the end of that, we need to attach a generating system that the government controls. If we had that now, we would be able to say to consumers, we will reduce the cost of energy to you as consumers.
Alex, let me ask you this. You've expressed yourself beautifully. In a nutshell, what do you think of the government's rush towards net zero, the COP26 summit agenda, the fact that 25% of our fuel bills on average, the money we pay, end up being renewable subsidies?
I think that's wrong. I think we need to take that 25% subsidy if we're going to keep it, which I think we probably should, but we need to invest that into base load and we need to invest that into our own infrastructure, because if we don't, all we're doing really is putting a sticking plaster over these problems. We will never solve the problem of energy price increases unless we get control of our own energy pricing. If we had that at the moment, we could not only put a cap on the prices for the general public, but very importantly, we could put a cap on the price to industry.
Alex, let's just hold it there. I'm just going to put these points to Vicky. Vicky, you're very experienced. You're the economist as well as me on this panel, certainly. Look, the view that Alex is expressing is an increasingly widely held view. He's a moderate, obviously very smart, informed guy. I talked earlier this week with Tom Tugendhat, who runs the Foreign Affairs Select Committee, a very moderate sort of one nation Tory. He's saying this rush to net zero is too fast. Do you think the government will relent?
Well, what the government has already said quite clearly is that gas is still going to play a very important role. And what has been happening right now when the wind wasn't blowing, of course it is today, it's interesting to see what happens, was that we were using at the time even coal-fired power stations for the base load that we absolutely needed. And it is absolutely true that nuclear power has reduced. There's a percentage that comes out of it for the moment, but of course we are constructing more nuclear plants.
About time.
But it has been a very expensive process. Yeah. And of course, we as taxpayers, yes, okay, you're worried about the 25% coming out of electricity bills, but in reality, the taxpayer is paying huge amount for those nuclear plants to be there. So the cost is going to be really high. So we also would bear in mind that even in places where there is self-sufficiency, in terms of where the energy comes from, energy prices have gone up very significantly too.
Indeed. Danny Kelly, let's come back to you finally. I said I'd give you a chance to respond to that fact that over half what you pay when you fill up a car on the forecourt with petrol or diesel goes to the government. What do you think of that? Is it sustainable?
But what we need, Liam, we need one of the supermarkets to blink first and do some sort of price reduction on fuel. Normally, it's either Asda or Morrison's who blink first. And of course, when one reduces the price of their fuel at the pump, then Sainsbury's and Tesco's follow suit. And I think that's what is needed. I really do. The uncertainty with Putin and Ukraine is compounding this situation at this moment, this financial situation. Motorists are getting ripped off at the pumps. They really are. And just to go back to this gentleman's net zero contribution, I think there should almost be a referendum to the British public. Now you know what net zero by 2050 looks like. Do you want it? I really do.
Well, funny you should say that, Danny. Let's see what happens. Danny Cayley there, car dealer in the West Midlands. Great to see you on the money. Alex Watt, fantastic contribution, my friend. GB News viewer. Let's have more of you emailing me, beatthesqueeze@gbnews.uk. And you too can come on the show and talk to the nation about your thoughts. And, of course, in the studio, as ever, friend of the show, Vicky Price, Chief Economist at the Centre for Economic and Business Research. Always good to see you. And thanks for weathering the storm to get here. Let's bring in some of your views now. We heard from Alex there. Gareth emailed to say the increase in fuel prices is a rip-off. The petrol diesel we're buying today was refined and paid for months ago at old oil prices. Oil used today was bought on the spot market months ago at this old price. This is scamming users. Exactly the point I made. I agree with you. Alison says, I don't understand how in 2008, when the price of crude oil was around $144 a barrel, and the price of petrol at the pump was around 68 pence a litre. And now the price per barrel is around $94, but the price at the pump is around £1.50. You can't blame that on Russia, just saying. It's partly due to the exchange rate. I agree with you, it's a bigger margin for the oil companies. It's partly because of the exchange rate. The cost of importing fuel is more expensive for the UK. It's priced in dollars. The pound has shifted, but it doesn't account for that whole difference, Alison. So you are on the money. And Joseph says, I'm really impressed with GB News and Liam Halligan for all these bright ideas. Crikey. They keep coming, like Beat the Squeeze and Scrap the VAT. This is the stuff relevant to the lives of millions of people, which decision makers in SW1, that's the London postcode of Westminster, don't seem to care about. The cost of living squeeze is real and biting. Well done for innovative broadcasting. Well, broadcasting is nothing else but a team game. I'm backed by a fantastic team, and these are their ideas too. So keep your emails coming. Thank you for all of them. This is On the Money with me, Liam Halligan. After the break, we're crossing over to Barry Island in South Wales and County Durham as Storm Eunice causes chaos across the UK. Plus,
when you crack it, you should smell, orris root, juniper, citrus.
That smells of gin.
Well, good.
Find out what happened when I sat down to taste this alcohol-free booze. Produced by reality TV star Spencer Matthews. We spoke about the market for non-alcoholic spirits. Well, if people drink decaffeinated coffee, why not so-called clean gin? But first, it's the GB News headlines with Rhiannon Jones.
It's 1:32. I'm Rhiannon Jones in the GB newsroom. A major incident has been declared in Suffolk as Storm Eunice batters southern England, causing widespread disruption. Flights have been cancelled, roads closed and rail services suspended. People are being advised to stay at home after the Met Office issued red weather warnings, with gusts reaching up to 90 miles per hour. Thames Valley Police says a member of the public has been seriously hurt by falling debris in Henley-on-Thames. Meanwhile, at Heathrow Airport, there have been some difficult landings as pilots negotiate the stormy conditions. Planes can be seen bouncing on the runways with gusts of wind testing the skills of those handling the aircraft. Some pilots were even forced to abandon their descent in the extreme weather. Russia plans to stage massive drills involving ballistic and cruise missiles, with President Vladimir Putin overseeing the nuclear exercise tomorrow. The war games come amid heightened tensions with Ukraine, both sides accusing each other of ceasefire violations. Hundreds of people have been rescued after a ferry caught fire between Greece and Italy in the early hours of the morning. The Greek Coast Guard confirmed most of the 290 passengers were taken to the island of Corfu. No deaths or serious injuries have been reported, although 2 remain trapped on the ferry. The cause of the fire is not yet known. Wales has scrapped the use of COVID passes. A person's vaccination status was required for entry to indoor and outdoor venues, including sports grounds and nightclubs. Although the rules have been changed, venues have been told that they can still demand proof of jabs if they want to. TV online and DAB Plus radio, this is GB News. More at the top of the hour, including the latest on Storm Eunice. It's back to Liam and On the Money next. Don't go anywhere.
GB News is the UK's home of discussion and debate
from all perspectives.
To stay up to date on the latest stories,
make sure that you subscribe to the GB News channel
right here on YouTube.
You can watch us live 24/7 across the whole world.
You can also check out exclusive content and catch up on previous episodes of your favourite shows.
Every day, we ask the questions
that you'd ask, so why not add your voice to the conversation in the comments section?
Don't forget to subscribe. We are GB News, Britain's news channel.
Every night at 11 on GB News, we bring you the next day's stories the day before.
It's basically like time travel.
If it's a big story, we'll cover it, guaranteed. But we'll also have some fun along the way.
Big opinions, big laughs. Sometimes big hair.
This is
Headliners, the paper review show that won't send you to sleep like the others will.
11 p.m, 7 nights a week. Join us.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon
and Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Welcome back. You're on the money with me, Liam Halligan. It's 1:36 on GB News Television and DAB Plus digital radio. Now, Storm Eunice is, of course, causing disruption across the country. Thousands more households are now without power, while in some parts of the UK, of course, homes have yet to be reconnected after Storm Dudley. This freak British weather's hitting economic and commercial life too. Many train services have been cancelled today, with flights and ferry services also disrupted. And National Highways has published a list of roads that should not be used by high-sided or vulnerable vehicles. GB News Home Affairs editor Mark White has the latest on Storm Eunice.
As dawn broke over Porthleven in Cornwall, a taster of the awesome power of Storm Eunice. This area under a rare red weather warning as Eunice's winds barrel ashore. Along the coast in the Welsh port of Porthcawl, the harbour walls took a real battering from the waves whipped up by the now storm-force winds. Millions of people are being urged to stay at home for the day as one of the worst storms in a generation works its way across the country. And the Coast Guard has warned weather watchers to stay away from the coastline because of the very obvious danger they could be washed out to sea. Still, here in Weston-super-Mare, locals couldn't resist dodging the waves on the seafront. In the Severn Estuary, the waves haven't been as high, but walking the dog is far from pleasant.
Actually, coming up here looks worse than what I imagined it to be. My bedroom window overlooks the sea, and I just thought, oh, it doesn't look too bad. But now coming up here, I'm thinking maybe I should get some sandbags.
Already there is major travel disruption, with many trees blown down, including this one in Bude in Cornwall. Across Wales, all train services have been cancelled. Elsewhere, across southern England in particular, other train services have also been severely restricted, with cancellations, delays and reduced timetables. South Eastern Railways says it's working to rescue passengers stranded on a train between Tunbridge and Sevenoaks.
So we were meant to be going to London Paddington for about
originally it was going to be about 9:30, but we've obviously had to leave a lot earlier, so it's 8:15 and we're trying to get on a train and still waiting for one.
Yeah, so I've just found out that my train is cancelled because down at the bottom the signs all say it's up. So I was going to go to London, and yeah, I think so far all of the trains in the next hour are cancelled.
Ferry services across the south have now been cancelled. This service, one of the last to brave the waves as the front end of Storm Eunice moved in. Further north, it's the snow that's bringing problems, like here in County Durham. A covering so far, but combined with the strong winds, it's likely to bring blizzard conditions. In Aberdeenshire, it's clearly fun for some, but travel is likely to be badly disrupted in the hours ahead. In the Irish Republic, more than 50,000 homes are already without power. The owners of this home near Cork had a lucky escape after the storms brought this tree crashing down. As Storm Eunice continues to plough her way across the UK, the advice for now is stay at home if you possibly can until conditions improve this evening. Mark White, GB News.
Pretty incredible pictures there from Mark White. Now, our Wales reporter Lily Hewitson is on Barry Island in South Wales. Lily, we've heard all train services in Wales have currently been suspended. Your lovely homeland seems to be bearing the brunt of Storm Eunice.
Yes, good afternoon, Liam. I can't quite hear you or what you just asked me, but I'll tell you what is going on here down on Barry Island. It's incredibly windy, that's for sure. The sea has, or the tide has, gone out quite a bit as we've been here throughout the day. Things have really, the picture's really changed over the last couple of hours, but the wind is consistent. We've seen some of those really high miles per hour worth of winds here in Wales, 90 miles per hour it's been hitting in some areas. I'm getting constant updates from Western Power Distribution, for example. Around 11,000 homes in Wales are currently without power, but 30,000 are said to have had their power already restored. Now, both the Severn Bridge and the Prince of Wales Bridge are closed at the moment. I've been looking on Facebook at plenty of videos, and it seems that 2 lorries have overturned on the M4, I think heading towards Neath Port Talbot. So there's some imagery of that, which is really shocking to see here from Wales. Now, the red weather warning is across the entirety of that South Wales coast, covering, miles and miles. It's so hard to catch your breath in this wind, I can't quite explain it, but it's expected that wind speeds could reach up to 90 miles per hour. We've seen, in some areas it's gone even beyond that, and that means that there is a danger to life. This is why it is a red weather warning, which stopped at midday today. Now, from midday until about 9 p.m. this evening, that'll then turn into an amber warning here in Wales, where things will start to ease up slightly. But there's plenty of precautions being taken across the country. As you said, Transport for Wales services are cancelled today, so absolutely no trains in place. Schools aren't running, and a lot of people are being told to, not head to work, perhaps work from home today if that is more suitable. But the message is to stay safe whilst the winds are, this high today, and we'll see how things go throughout and into the evening.
Lily Hewitson, stay safe. Great to see you here on The Money. Hope the weather eases for you there soon. You don't get blown away, of course. Let's now cross over to our north or east of England reporter, Rachel Sweeney, who's in County Durham. Rachel, if you can hear me, we just heard from Lily. She's on the west-facing coast of the UK, of course. You're on the coast facing the North Sea rather than the Atlantic, but it seems pretty blustery where you are.
Liam, we've seen a huge change in the last hour. I was just saying to Tom Harwood how picturesque it was here, how lovely the snow was to look at. But in the last 60 minutes, it has changed so much. We've seen a dramatic change in the wind speed. I'm sorry, I'm going to take my earpiece out now. The wind speed has gone up so much. It is absolutely biting cold, and the rain is coming down exceptionally heavy. Because there's still snow on the ground, that's going to turn to ice, and that is going to make driving conditions even harder for people. There's been 1,000 people so far, 1,000 homes without electricity, without power. Northern Power Grid said they're working to get that back on, but even that in the last hour has almost doubled. So it's a difficult picture here in County Durham, but we'll stick with it and keep you updated throughout the day.
Our intrepid GB News reporters across the country. The general picture seems to be with Lily on the west coast, in South Glamorgan there in South Wales, saying that the storm's easing slightly, and Rachel Sweeney on the northeast coast facing the North Sea, saying that Storm Eunice is hotting up where she is. It does seem to be shifting eastward. I hope all our correspondents stay safe. It's time now for my daily in-depth Money Talks interview series. Now, a question. Do you fancy a gin and tonic with no alcohol? Well, some of us drink coffee with no caffeine. We even eat hamburgers with no meat, so why not? In today's episode of Money Talks, I talked to reality TV star Spencer Matthews about a firm he started in 2019 called Cleanco, which makes non-alcoholic spirits, including tequila, rum and gin. As the low and no alcohol sector keeps growing, Matthews has raised millions of pounds for his startup, positioning Cleanco at the forefront of what he calls a clean drinking revolution. So here he is, former Made in Chelsea star turned businessman Spencer Matthews with his No Booze Booze, my latest guest on Money Talks. Spencer, here we are. You're the man who's selling non-alcoholic. We've got non-alcoholic tequila here, gin, flavoured gin. I think that's a rhubarb one, and then non-alcoholic rum as well. We need to start this interview, and I'm a very serious journalist, as you know. I think we need to taste a non-alcoholic gin and tonic. Do you want to do the honours?
Absolutely.
So the ice goes in as normal.
Yeah, I mean, the idea is that the ritual is exactly the same, right, as having a gin and tonic.
That's right.
It's supposed to
I'm feeling relaxed already.
Well, good. That's it's supposed to fill that gap between, desire and compromise. You fancy a gin and tonic, but you're having a clean gin and tonic instead.
Very distinctive bottle, a kind of Art Deco vibe going on there.
Thank you very much. Here, let me do the honours. So when you crack it, you should smell, orris root, juniper, citrus.
That smells of gin.
Well, good. Yeah. It should really kind of, the whole experience should feel like you're having an alcoholic drink.
Because having a drink, it isn't just about the drink, is it? It's about the ritual, and it's about the mixers, and we got some nice tonic here.
Absolutely. Well, I can tell you from experience, someone who used to love a gin and tonic probably a bit too much, is this for me now does the trick. I get everything from a clean gin and tonic that I would from a gin and tonic.
Cheers.
Cheers.
Yeah, that tastes good. It hasn't got the real kick of the alcohol, but it definitely tastes like a gin and tonic.
Yeah, it's kind of like it's designed. Well, Clean G's designed to trigger the kind of senses of enjoying a gin and tonic.
Yeah.
It's something to elevate your soft drink or your tonic water. Back when I changed my relationship with alcohol, I just noticed that there was a real gap, a real void in that gin and tonic moment that you described. Just putting your feet up at the end of the long day. Right, I'm going to have a gin and tonic.
And I'm getting all the aftertaste of a gin and tonic as well.
It should feel a bit dry on your palate as well. It should. And I don't think anyone's quite there yet, when you can have the Clean G, and it be exactly the same as an alcoholic gin. Although, we have done blind consumer taste tests and a lot of people struggle to tell the difference. But, if you're a big gin drinker and you love gin, I wouldn't say that anyone in this space is quite there yet.
So you've launched this company. I think you launched in 2019. You've been going for a while. Obviously, during lockdown, a lot of us did drink a bit more. Maybe some of us moved away from alcohol to non-alcoholic drinks. Tell me about why you did this. Did you feel that alcohol was getting too much for you? You didn't want to drink as much as you were?
Absolutely, yeah. I feel, I created Cleanco out of a desire to fill a gap in my life. When I went sober, and that was just before the birth of our first child. Right. I just wanted to assess, my relationship with alcohol, which over the years has been a bit tempestuous, a bit turbulent. I was a pretty heavy drinker. It was quite ordinary for me, to be drinking with work. I was a city trader, very social job. Then I worked in nightlife, very social job. And then, I became a television personality, which also involved, holding a drink a fair amount of the time. And although I never kind of saw it as deeply problematic then, around the time when your natural level of responsibility increases and you're about to become a father and perhaps
reassess.
Just reassess certain bits and bobs.
But you're not on some kind of temperance mission here. You're not saying people shouldn't drink. You're saying that if you do drink, if you like a drink, or if you did like a drink but now you don't drink, all those different categories, this could be an interesting and useful part of your life. So you don't drink as much alcohol as you did.
Absolutely. Like the main market is for moderation. This is a way of enjoying yourself more in many cases. We target, or in fact, our primary consumer. Sorry,
it's grown on me.
Yeah, well, it does actually get better if you leave it. Yeah, our primary. Person who buys this is somebody who mixes cocktails at home, who loves alcohol, but maybe pregnant, driving, more health conscious.
And maybe not on a Tuesday night, save it for Thursday or Friday.
Maybe they've got an early morning Zoom call and you've had a couple of gin and tonics and you don't want to push it that bit further. I think the market for abstinence, for total abstinence, is relatively small compared to the market for moderation.
Very well put. So Spencer, tell us about the journey. I mean, you were sitting there, you had an idea. Lots of people have ideas. It's all about execution, isn't it? It's all about putting them into practice. How difficult was that journey from conception to reality?
I get, when I feel a kind of lightning moment, I suppose, I get pretty stuck in. So, I'd been sober for 3 or 4 months. I was at a dinner party and somebody asked me whether or not I wanted a non-alcoholic gin and tonic. And I'd never heard of that. No, I was like, what have I been drinking for the last 3 or 4 months? And I suddenly thought to myself, I became really enthralled with the idea. It was a different well-known brand. It was the only brand at the time. And I found that it was kind of quite complicated. It was quite an expensive proposition too, and I became quite enthralled with the idea of really driving home flavour and the experience, that you look for.
On the palate.
That you look for when you have a gin and tonic.
That's what's impressing me, the texture of it.
Not something else though. So these particular liquids were made with botanicals and ingredients that you wouldn't find in gin. And I thought, why not just make a non-alcoholic gin? So I really went down the road of, traveling around to different distilleries. I flew to Cork, and I was trying to find a partner who would want to embark on the mission of creating, the world's best non-alcoholic gin, I suppose. That was where it started. And then it quickly became a play to be across, a different portfolio across all major spirits. And here we are with a few. We've got a whiskey coming out as well.
Wow.
The whiskey's fantastic.
Again, tequila, gin, rhubarb gin, and rum.
Yeah, we have a vodka as well. Although, of course, vodka without ethanol, it can be quite bland. So it's a spiced apple vodka.
Okay, interesting. So where is this gin distilled, I guess? Do you still use the word distilled, even though you're not producing alcohol?
Yeah, we have moved kind of from distillation to blending.
Okay.
So I would say that blending was a more important process to us than distilling itself. When we first started, and I see us as kind of pioneers in the non-alcoholic world, I suppose. When we first started, we had no competition really to speak of, apart from this one brand that was quite different to us. And we tried to just distill product, all together in a copper pot still. I'm sure you're familiar with how gin's made, but essentially you boil up botanicals, which are ingredients, herbs, with neutral grain spirit, ethanol essentially, and that creates a really dense, high alcohol liquid, which is then cut with ethanol or water, depending on the brand. Doing these drinks that way is really hard without the ethanol. Obviously, you're left with product which would be unsuitable, I think, to sell as a premium non-alcoholic product. So what we do now is we focus really on withdrawing and drawing from botanicals, just flavor, using all kinds of different technologies, and then we blend these flavors together
and where does that happen, Spencer? Where does that manufacturing process happen?
So we work with two facilities. One's just outside of Bristol and one's just outside of Leeds. But
Very interesting. So you didn't go with the Irish in the end?
Not in the end, no.
Maybe in the future.
We had some problems surrounding IP.
Intellectual property. Okay.
Absolutely.
Very interesting. You're selling something that people haven't really heard of, and yet clearly you seem to have broken through. It can't have just been your natural charm.
No, well.
I'm sure that was important.
I'm sure.
God, this is taking effect. You sure there's no alcohol in this?
I can assure you there isn't.
And it tastes good. Spencer Matthews.
Thanks so much. Cheers.
Now that was Spencer Matthews of Cleanco, formerly of Made in Chelsea. You can listen to the full strength, low alcohol, 25-minute version of that interview now on My Money Talks podcast. That's on the GB News app or via our fabulous GB News YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe to that. Before we finish the show, let's bring in a few more of your emails. GB News viewers and listeners, always at the centre of On the Money. Irvin contacted us to say, instead of the government taking a windfall tax, why not give oil companies the option of either paying the tax or reducing the pump price by, say, 50 pence a litre for 6 months? Interesting idea, Irvin. Karen contacted us. One of our local supermarkets was charging £1.40 a litre. However, most local garages were charging £1.45. Supermarkets, of course, using that petrol as a loss leader. So you go and do your shopping there as well. Robert says if fuel were cheaper, people would go out more and probably spend money. The way we're going, people will have nothing to spend on anything. I can't believe that's a good idea. We need to spend to produce. And Robbie says, surely high energy costs fill the green agenda by reducing our use of energy. Growing up, most of the baby boomers enjoyed the luxury of perhaps 1 or 2 rooms in the house partially heated. We now use far more energy within our centrally heated homes. That's all we've got time for today. Thanks for joining me here on The Money. Have a good weekend. We'll be back at 1 p.m. on Monday. Continue to focus on the cost of living crisis and helping you beat the squeeze. This is GB News. I'm Liam Halligan, and that was On the Money.
Hello, I'm Aidan McGivern. Storm Eunice is battering the UK with red warnings in force for dangerous winds in some parts of the country. Eunice has deepened rapidly overnight, and it's on the southern flank of this storm where the strongest winds are expected, and those strong winds with disruption likely in many places sweeping east across the southern half of the UK during the rest of Friday. Scotland, Northern England, Northern Ireland likely to see impacts from wind and from snow, mainly over hills. For the southern half of the country, amber warning for widespread disruption and dangerous winds, but the most dangerous winds in the red areas towards the southwest as well as the southeast, where the focus will increasingly turn during the afternoon as the strongest of the winds push east across the country. 70 to 80 mile per hour wind gusts for southeast England, even inland. That would make it the most powerful storm for some years, and widespread disruption along with some danger from those winds. But further north, the wind's not quite as strong. However, we are going to see further outbreaks of rain and hill snow, particularly for Scotland, where there'll be blizzards over hills and drifting of any lying snow. 3 or 4 Celsius across Scotland, Northern Ireland, Northern England, 8 or 9 Celsius in the south. But it stays very windy despite the sunshine during the rest of the day. It stays very windy well into the evening, and then the winds gradually come down overnight with clear spells in the south, 1 or 2 showers in the west and the north, but further hill snow to come for Scotland and northern England. 0 to 2 Celsius in the north, 3 Celsius for Cardiff, London, Southampton as we start off Saturday. Some sunshine, mainly in the east first thing before the next system barrels in from the west. This will affect primarily the southern half of the UK with outbreaks of rain and hill snow for North Wales and northern England, as well as the North Midlands, and accompanied by strong winds, gales around the south coast, but not as strong as today. Quieter further north with some sunshine and showers. Sunday sees wet and windy weather return from the northwest.
GB News is the UK's home of discussion and debate
from all perspectives.
To stay up to date on the latest stories,
make sure that you subscribe to the GB News channel right here on YouTube.
You can watch us live 24/7 across the whole world.
You can also check out exclusive content and catch up on previous episodes of your favourite shows. Every day, we ask the questions that you'd ask, so why not add your voice to the conversation in the comments section?
Don't forget to subscribe. We are GB News, Britain's news channel.
Every night at 11 on GB News, we bring you the next day's stories the day before.
Basically like time travel.
If it's a big story, we'll cover it, guaranteed. But we'll also have some fun along the way.
Big opinions, big laughs. Sometimes big hair.
This is
Headliners, the paper review show that won't send you to sleep like the others will.
11 p.m, 7 nights a week. Join us.